Today I'm going to review this fragrance. It's called Boss Bottled Intense for the perfume concentration. And if you stick around until the end of this video, I will give you two great alternatives to this fragrance as well. Two great, cheap, affordable clones. That's next here on Nordic Fragrance. Hi, my name is Tommy and you are watching Nordic Fragrance. Welcome. So today we are going to take a closer look at this fragrance here. It's called Boss Bottled Intense EdP Concentration. This is a flanker of the original Boss bottle that was released back in 1998. And Boss Bottled have had some flankers over the years. I believe this is the third flanker. First there was the Intense EdT version and then came this Intense EdP version. And the EdP version was released back in 2015. Boss Bottled is a classic manly fragrance that many people describe as a apple pie kind of fragrance. I will describe this fragrance more in depth later, but first let's take a look at the presentation and the bottle. So this is the bottle of Boss Bottled Intense, and as you can see it just says Boss, Hugo Boss Intense on the front of this. There's really nothing special about this bottle, I don't think so anyway. It just looks like a little ordinary bottle. But I do like the color of the juice inside, it's really beautiful. On the top we have a plastic cap, not magnetic or anything, but it sits pretty tight so you can hold it in the cap. The sprayer, a little weak in my opinion, it doesn't distribute all too well. So my overall assessment of the bottle of Boss Bottled Intense is it's really nothing special about it. The sprayer is nothing special, but the juice inside is very beautiful. Boss Bottled Intense comes in the sizes 50 and 100 ml bottles. Okay, so what does Boss Bottled Intense EdP smell like then? What you first get when you spray this fragrance is a strong apple note. It's not the kind of fresh green apple that you get in like Nordic Fragrance for example. This is more of a red apple note. It's not as fresh as the classical green apple note that are used in most fragrances. When you get an apple note, you oftentimes get the green apple note. The red apple note is a little more rare. It's not as fresh as the green one, but it certainly gives it another kind of depth and character to the fragrance. Personally, I do enjoy the green apple note more than the red apple note, but that's just my personal preference. What I get from this fragrance is a red apple note at the very start. And unfortunately it's not a very natural apple note to my nose anyway. It's quite synthetic to be honest. This red apple note is kind of layered above the rest of the fragrance, which is cinnamon and vanilla mainly. And unfortunately I have to say that the cinnamon nor the vanilla is quite natural smelling in this one either. All of this composition is quite synthetic to be honest. Now synthetic doesn't necessarily mean that it's bad, but I just warn you guys that are looking for natural smelling fragrances. This is not a natural smelling fragrance in any way. It's quite a synthetic concoction of a fragrance. However, it's quite pleasing to my nose. I do enjoy it. It's not a bad fragrance at all. Now let's dive into the rating of Boss Bottled Intense EdP. So my assessment of Boss Bottled Intense EdP is that it's a good fragrance. It's certainly not spectacular in any way. It's certainly not a great fragrance, but it's a good solid one. And although most notes in this fragrance is quite synthetic, I still think it's a very pleasing fragrance overall. The problem for me personally is in the late dry down of this fragrance. That's when the prominent red apple note starts to fade away, and that really reveals the quite sweet synthetic mess that it's covered behind that red apple note in the beginning. And when I say the late dry down, I mean about 4, maybe 5 hours into it. Then the apple is really starting to fade away and the sweet synthetic mess behind it is borderlining unpleasant to my nose. When I've gotten this far into the fragrance, I usually reapply to get back the apple note again, or I wash it off completely. But overall I think this is an okay fragrance anyway, and I give it a rating of 7.5. Next up, we want an opinion of a woman, and as always I ask my beautiful girlfriend about her thoughts about Boss Bottled Intense EdP. And here we certainly have the proof that one single fragrance can be perceived in many different ways. My girlfriend, she really enjoyed this one. She couldn't put her finger on exactly what it was about this one, but she said there was something about this fragrance that really made her appreciate and like this one. She also said that this was a very classically manly fragrance that could work for men in many different occasions. She believed that this was a fragrance that the man could just spray on and smell like a nice smelling man in whatever setting, in whatever place. Just an overall good smelling manly fragrance, she thought. She was really impressed with this one, and she gave it a strong rating of 9. Next up is the strength rating. And this is an EDP concentration, so it lasts quite a while. Unfortunately, the projection isn't that great though. In the beginning of this fragrance, it projects for about an arm's length, but that quickly fades away, and after about an hour it's half of that, half an arm's length. After the first hour then, the projection slowly fades even more, and it becomes a skin scent more or less after about 4 hours. However, the longevity is pretty good on this one. You get about 7 to 8 hours out of it. So the overall strength of this fragrance is really okay, I would say, and it's definitely better than the original Boss Bottled, which is quite weak nowadays. So I give Boss Bottled Intense EDP a strength rating of 7. Next up is the versatility rating. This is a quite sweet fragrance, so it's best suited for the colder seasons, winter, fall, early spring, I would say. I think it can be worn in summertime also, but in the high summer heat it's really not where this fragrance shines. I would rather suggest you go with a fragrance with a green apple note than a red apple note in the high summer heat. But I do think this fragrance is a very good dumb reach fragrance. If you're just going out doing something casually, this is a great fragrance to use. However, it's not strong enough to use for clubbing or anything like that. And although it might contain somewhat of a sexy vibe, I wouldn't suggest using it on a date. There are certainly many better fragrances to use for a date than Boss Bottled Intense, in my opinion anyway. This is quite inoffensive though, so you can use it in office or school or something like that, in a work environment. You won't offend anyone with this one because it doesn't project that well, and it smells quite pleasant. So overall, I think this is a pretty versatile fragrance, and I give it a versatility rating of 7. Lastly, we have the price rating. You have to pay about 55 euros or $65 US for a 100 ml bottle of Boss Bottled Intense EDP, which makes it quite in the middle of designer fragrances, I would say. It's not exactly super expensive, but it's certainly not a cheap one either. So we land somewhere in the middle, and I give it a price rating of 6. So would I recommend Boss Bottled Intense EDP for you guys watching this video? No, I actually won't. This is not a favorite fragrance of mine in any way. It's an okay, good smelling fragrance, but certainly not one of the best. There are so many other great fragrances on the market that smells, in my opinion, way better than this one. Maybe if this fragrance was a real cheapie, like half the price of what this actually costs, then I would recommend it. But I don't really think you get enough value for what you pay with this fragrance. I have a whole bunch of really good cheapies in my collection that smells better than this one and that costs way less. However, if you really like this scent DNA, I will in just a minute or two give you 2 great alternatives, 2 good clones of this one that are way more inexpensive and that smells almost the same as this one, so stay tuned for that. But this fragrance itself, Boss Bottled Intense EDP, no, there are better fragrances on the market. I wouldn't recommend you to spend your money on this one. So this was my review of Boss Bottled Intense, the EDP version. I hope you enjoyed it. Now let's get to some alternatives, some good clones of this one. First up is Prez by Dreamworld. This is a very inexpensive fragrance. It doesn't last quite as long as the original fragrance does. You get 4 to 5 hours out of this one. And it doesn't really smell very much alike the original one either. I would say about 60 to 70% alike. But what's great about this one is that you get a really good and strong red apple note in this one. So if you really enjoy red apple note in a fragrance, then this one is a great alternative. You get less of the cinnamon and the other notes in the background of Boss Bottled Intense, and more of the red apple in this one. And the red apple in this one actually smells more natural than the red apple in Boss Bottled Intense, in my opinion. So this is an okay alternative to Boss Bottled Intense, Prez by Dreamworld. And now on to the really good alternative to Boss Bottled Intense EdP. This is Top Gun 2 from Milton Lloyd. I must tell you guys, this one smells incredibly much alike the original one. I would go so far as to say that they are almost identical. At least 95% alike. Where they differ is in the very opening, like the first minute or something. This one is a little more harsher, Boss Bottled Intense EdP is a little smoother overall. But after that initial spray and the first minute, they are pretty much similar fragrances. I don't think I have ever encountered a cologne that smells so much like the original one as Top Gun 2 from Milton Lloyd. However, this one does not last as long as Boss Bottled Intense, but you get a good 5 hours out of it at the very least. And the really good thing is that you pay at the most a quarter of the price of the original fragrance. So if you are interested in the Boss Bottled DNA, but don't want to pay what in my opinion is an overpriced for a decent fragrance, and try this one out. This is a really great value for money fragrance and a really good clone of Boss Bottled Intense. Top Gun 2 from Milton Lloyd. Great alternative to Boss Bottled Intense. This was all from me, Tommy here at Nordic Fragrance. Feel free to comment in the comments down below. Maybe you agree with me, maybe you disagree with me, let me know. Feel free to share and like this video as much as you want, and if you want to support me and don't miss any future videos or top lists, then just click the subscribe button. And until we meet again, go frag yourselves.